The early to mid-90s were filled with fantastic and iconic racing titles, from the mascot racing of Super Mario Kart to the high-energy Daytona USA. The 90s had racing games for everybody. Unfortunately, the 90s also had a fair few flops. Allow me to introduce the Atari Jaguar, a console that was released across 1993 to 1994, with a controller that looked somewhat like a phone, and also looks somewhat complicated to use. Anyway, the Jaguar did not have many games released for it, but one of those games was called Checkered Flag. So, welcome to the Worst Racing Games, the series where you guys suggest different racing games that you think are terrible, and then I play them, review them, and rank them. Last week we had yet another piece of shovelware with Drag Racer USA, so I'm grateful that the sacred wheel of worst racing games has chosen something a bit more retro this week. So before we get into the gameplay of Checkered Flag, let's dive into a bit of history about the game. Checkered Flag was developed by Rebellion Developments, who had previously worked on the Alien vs Predator game, also for the Jaguar, which actually ended up being the best-selling game on the system. They would much later go on to be known for the Sniper Elite series. So, Checkered Flag is a conversion of a 1991 Atari Lynx game, which shares the same name, but was not 3D. The review scores for the Lynx version are much higher though, so make of that what you will. Anyway, the game was published by Atari and released across November and December of 1994, depending on where you lived in the world. Supposedly this game started off as a simulation-themed title, but ended up more as an homage to Virtua Racing, which I can see. Now, before we jump into the gameplay, I just want to take a moment to plug the channel. So if you're a fan of retro gaming or racing games, then why not hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications of my future uploads. Whilst you're at it, if you're a fan of this series and want to support the channel further, then check out my Patreon to get your hands on videos early, to get your name in the credits, and to see some extra behind the scenes stuff. Anyway, thank you all for the continued support. Let's get back to talking about Checkered Flag. So when you boot the game up, you're greeted by a surprisingly large amount of options before you start racing. You can change the colour of your car, you can change the weather between sunny, foggy and rain, you can adjust your wing to be high or low, change your tyres between dry and wet, and even switch between manual or automatic shifting. On top of this, you can also select how many opponents in a race and how many laps you complete. I'm a big fan of the amount of options you get considering when this game was released. Now, you get 3 game modes to play around with in this game: Practice Mode, where you drive the track for as many laps as you want by yourself, Single Race, which is fairly self-explanatory, and then Tournament, where you compete through a series of races, but you can't adjust weather settings or the amount of laps in Tournament mode as it is preset. To start with, I hopped into a single race, just to get familiar with the game and its handling and control setup. You would think I would have gone for practice mode, but I'm an idiot. So I am emulating this game on modern hardware with a modern controller, so the controls are mapped differently to what they would have been on that confusing looking Jaguar controller. However, the basics remain the same. You have a button to accelerate and one to brake, then you steer with the D-pad. If you select manual, then you also press up and down on the D-pad to shift up or down a gear as well, which makes things slightly difficult for a not great player like myself. Yeah, maybe let's just stick with automatic for now. So, how does it actually feel to drive? Well, that answer is a tad more complicated than just good or bad. The handling really fluctuates from feeling really smooth and responsive to feeling like a ton of bricks on ice, and there doesn't really seem to be an in-between to that. One lap you feel like you're flying and nailing every corner, and the next it feels like your steering wheel just doesn't turn and you're suddenly bouncing from wall to wall. It gives a very mixed feeling between very satisfying and controller smashing frustration. Speaking of frustration, the collision detection in this game is just abysmal. When it comes to barriers and walls and whatnot, it's honestly fine, but when it comes to other races, it is absolutely awful. Overtaking in this game can really become a chore if the game suddenly decides it wants you and another car to collide. And when you do collide with a car, it's really unpredictable as to whether you'll just bounce off slightly and continue just fine, or rear off into a wall and bounce about and take a while to recover. And whilst we're talking about the other racers, let's discuss how they drive. Well, they drive very slowly. Perhaps the dev team decided to balance out the frustrating collision detection and physics by making the CPU races incredibly slow. So even if it takes you several attempts to perform an overtake and you bounce all over the place, you're still pretty much guaranteed victory every time. And if you are pretty much guaranteed victory every time, it does beg the question, why even bother to begin with? Thankfully, I found some satisfaction in trying to beat my own lap times as I was storming off ahead, but would often find my attempts foiled by trying to lap these CPU racers, as they obviously don't just try and move out of the way, because that would be far too easy. And again, there is some satisfaction when you can easily fly by them, but getting that overtake satisfaction is so incredibly rare. It's not all bad, however. There are some genuinely impressive features to be found in this game. As I mentioned before, the amount of options provided to set up a race are pretty impressive. Personally, I'm a big fan of the weather conditions in this game. Racing in the rain is surprisingly fun, and the fog adds an extra layer of challenge with the lack of visibility. And both effects look pretty good too. As well as having a variety of options, this game also features 10 individual tracks, which is really good. They don't all feel the same either, with some having theming such as snow and ice, or another being set in the desert. No two tracks feel the same. You also get a few different car colours to choose from, which is nice. However, speaking of the cars, I'm not too sure how I feel about how they look in-game. The landscapes look alright, given the platform, but compared to the Need for Speed on 3DO, which launched the same year, it truly pales in comparison. Just on a side note, the head of Atari claimed around the time that the Jaguar was as powerful as the Sega Saturn, and only slightly weaker than the original PlayStation. Whatever you say, buddy, all I'm saying is it's just not adding up. Whilst we're on the topic of design, another irritating thing about this game is the sound design. The engine sounds are irritating, the tyre screeches sound naff, and even the limited soundtrack gets incredibly repetitive after about 10 minutes. There just really isn't enough game here to keep you playing for anything more than a short burst every now and then, just for a small dose of nostalgia. So in terms of the game's critical response, it received fairly mixed reactions at the time of release. Some magazines were giving review scores as high as 72 out of 100, but others were going as low as 30 out of 100 or even a 2 out of 10. Now, as someone who didn't play this at the time, because I wasn't born yet, it's quite easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, the game is bad because it's old. But it's not as simple as that. If I were a critic, I would probably have put this in the 50 out of 100 realm back then. Visually, it's not great, and the controls and handling are a bit whack, but there is still some charm and fun to be had here. Anyway, these review scores sadly did not translate into massive sales, as the game was estimated to have sold approximately 20,000 copies, as per internal documents from Atari. In all fairness, the highest selling title for the console sold approximately 85,000 copies, so the bar wasn't exactly high to begin with. So now the time has come to rank Checkered Flag on our worst racing games tier list. This certainly isn't the worst game we've played in this series, but it definitely isn't the best either. For me, this game belongs in the rubbish tier. It does have some redeeming qualities, but not enough to save it from being in this tier. So what do you think of Checkered Flag? Would you rank it differently? Have you played it? And if you played it on original hardware, what did you think of the controls? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, if you have a suggestion for a game you'd like to see added to the worst racing games wheel, pop that in the comments as well. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap the bell for notifications. A massive thank you to my Patreon subscribers for the support, and all I have left to say is bye bye.